Hello and welcome back. So continuing on with the parsing video series, in this next section of videos, what we're going to be looking at is ANTLR. And we're going to kick things off with an overview of ANTLR. Nelson?
Okay, so ANTLR is a program that you can use to generate the lexers and parsers that you were previously writing by hand in the past video series.
Okay, so first question then. How much is it going to cost me?
ANTLR is free and open source.
Well, that's a good thing. All right.
Yes. Yeah, it's very, very powerful. It's similar to tools like Lex and Yak, although it works a little bit differently than both of those if you're familiar with them. But the idea is with ANTLR is you start off with a grammar file, and that grammar file is just a text file that's written in the language that ANTLR understands. So ANTLR has its own custom language for describing other languages.
And we're going to obviously then be taking a look at that specific language, the syntax and all.
Right, that's going to be the focus of the series, is to figure out, or the subset of the series is to figure out, what do you need to do in order to tell ANTLR to parse a particular type of language.
Okay.
But then what it does is it takes that code file and you run it through the ANTLR executable, and it spits out a lexer and a parser, or a lexer or a parser, however you have it configured. But it spits out code that is capable of understanding the language that you described to ANTLR.
Wait, now code that's capable of understanding, or it's going to spit out actual code in the language that you're using, for instance, in our case, C#?
Yeah, it'll spit out the code in any target language that you want it to.
Okay, so this will actually generate C# code for us. It'll generate classes.
Yes. ANTLR supports pretty much all the languages, C, C#, Java, and everything in between. So you can use the ANTLR grammar to generate these components in multiple languages.
Oh, that's awesome.
So you start off with the grammar file, basically. So the overview of how you actually use ANTLR is you start off with the grammar file. And the grammar file is going to basically be a rule set of how do you want to define the different rules for the lexer or the parser. Now, I mentioned before that there are different types of grammar files. In this case, what we're seeing here is called a combined grammar file, which includes the rules for a lexer and the rules for a parser.
Okay.
When we feed that grammar file into ANTLR, what it's going to go ahead and do is generate a lexer class and a parser class. And of course, this is only applicable to the combined grammar that generates both the lexer and a parser.
Okay, so just for a second, so talk about rules in general.
Well, a rule is going to be basically how we define the language we want to parse to ANTLR using ANTLR's own specific language.
Okay.
So a rule is going to be saying that in the context of a lexer rule, we're going to say, given this pattern of text, we want ANTLR's generated lexer to treat this text as a particular token. And if you remember, a token is simply a way to generalize text that's being sent in from the input stream.
Gotcha. Okay.
In the case of the parser rules, it basically you can make them as granular as you wish, but if you think about it in terms of the recursive descent parser we wrote previously, every parser rule corresponds to a method on that parser.
Mm-hmm.
So now that we have both of these C# classes, now these aren't compiled classes, this is just C# source code. We then, at runtime, go ahead and create our well, let me back up a second. We take those C# classes and we stick them in a project that we want to understand a particular language. Then at runtime, we feed the lexer the input stream. Then we feed the parser the results of the lexer. And then it does something.
Magic.
Okay. Well, it does really whatever you want it to. The cool thing about ANTLR is by default, when you are using ANTLR, all you're going to be doing is generating C# classes that understand a language, as in they will successfully parse a language if it matches the specification defined in your grammar file, or it will fail. Mm-hmm. Now, to do something interesting, though, which you'll obviously want to do, you'll often do one of two things. You will either insert literal C# code into the grammar file itself and have that C# code be emitted inline in the lexers and parsers that were generated by ANTLR. Or you might want to define what are called AST rewrite rules, which will go ahead and take the tokens that you matched out in your parser rules and turn them into an AST, or an abstract syntax tree. You can then take that abstract syntax tree and use it in your program however you wish.
Okay. And we're going to be seeing that stuff as we progress forward here, obviously.
Yep.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's really about it as far as an intro to ANTLR, what it does, overview of how you actually use it, at least the process of going from a grammar file to an executable program.
Okay. So you want to keep this one just as a real quick intro like that, and then just in the next video progress forward?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, that will wrap up this video, and we'll see you guys in the next. Thanks a lot.